A Man Called Ove.
Yes.
Okay, so now you've read the book, and we had some discussion about the pronunciation of the title.
I seem to remember when the Radio 2 book club did this, that it was a Man Called Ove.
Ove.
But then I suspect it's somewhere between the two, and the Swedish pronunciation is going to be open to interpretation as far as we can see.
So when I was watching...
It's OVE, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And the closest... I wrote a note to myself, pronounced Ove, because, I was thinking Uva, over, and you was thinking... So it's like somewhere between O and it's over, like that.
Over, under, underdone.
Exactly. But as you know, my pronunciation of names is terrible. Having been sort of somewhat unimpressed by the mordant Scandi humour of the 100-year-old man who climbed out the window and disappeared, which I thought was a classic case of something not translating, I did approach this with a certain degree, again, of trepidation. And I was delighted to be able to report that, in fact, it completely won me over. So Rolf Lassgård is the grieving widow who we meet at the beginning. He's a grumpy guy living on this housing estate in which the housing association have all these rules that he appears to have made up about whether you can park, where you can park, whether you can drive, what noise you can make, what regulations about when you put your rubbish out. And he seems to spend most of his time just bickering with his neighbours and being fed up. We also meet him at the very beginning. He's suicidal and he is attempting to commit suicide, but he keeps being interrupted by people breaking housing association rules that he therefore needs to go out and fix. So there's this kind of very, very Scandi, that's very Scandi humour, isn't it? Then what happens is he gets new neighbours, and at the beginning he's absolutely infuriated by them because they're noisy and they park in the wrong place and they've got a trailer that they don't... But then what happens is that Parvane, who's the wife, and she's pregnant, played by Baha Paz, starts to see that there is something beyond this very grumpy facade. And she says, look, I need driving lessons. Maybe you could help me with driving lessons. And they start to talk and we start to discover his past. And then through flashback, we discover the story of him as a young man facing trauma as a child and then growing up and being a very particular kind of person, but somebody who is honourable, somebody who is good, somebody who is decent, somebody who then falls in love and we then see the story of his relationship with his wife. And essentially what the movie does is it shows you how somebody can go from being one person to being another person, that the person that they were is still inside. So do you remember obviously you remember the plot from the book?
Yes, I mean, I do vaguely, but it's one of those, and I haven't seen the film, so no. But I imagine it has all the. If it is translated well to the cinema, it is a delightful film. It will be delightful and warm-hearted. And
there was a quote on the back of the book that said, "Men now have no excuse not to read that paperback they never got round to reading." I haven't read the book. I just saw the film, and I was moved. Firstly, I thought that the dark comedy worked well and was funny and was dark. Secondly, I thought that the way in which the film moved from that into sentimentality didn't in any way grate. And when this film wanted to provoke tears, when it wanted to make the audience cry, it did it in a way which was deadpan enough to make you feel like you weren't being manipulated into crying, despite the fact that is evidently what was happening.
Is it in English?
No.
I'm just checking.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can get different versions, and sometimes
I see.
Actually
fine.
That's fine. We'll go for an English version.
But I was really impressed by how it moved from that sort of register of, dark, morbid humour into something that was much more sentimental, something that was much lighter, something that was much more, touching. And, I mean, there are wonderful discussions about whether or not Saabs are inherently superior to Volvos. There's a wonderful depiction of two people who are very good friends who fall out over the issue of Saabs and Volvos. And
that's a great Swedish argument.
Exactly right. Never quite get it back together again.
What side of the argument are you on?
Well, I'm a sort of 1956 Dodge man, so What do I know? Which side of the argument are you on, Simon?
Well, I would think that I've never had a Saab, so I wouldn't know.
Oh, I see. Fine. So you would dodge the bullet as well. Okay. So I really liked it. It won me over. It did what it was meant to do, which is to show you somebody, who has got to a position in their life when they're embittered, when they're, there's a dark rain cloud hangs over them, and they feel like they're sort of, imposing that on everybody else that they meet, and yet through sort of simple human interaction, they become something else. They become someone who's open and whose past is revealed to them. And I think the thing that it did really nicely was it showed you that thing that nobody is just the thing they appear on the surface. I know this sounds really obvious, but nobody is just the thing they appear on the surface. That actually everyone got to where they are through a series of life events that changed them. And this lovely thing in the end, it is a love story. It's a story about somebody who absolutely lived for their relationship with their wife. He says at one point there was nothing before her and there is nothing after her. And the film then sort of starts to unpack that idea, but does so in a way that won me over. I liked it very much.